Is Hock Ball just a one-hit wonder? Are the Bulldogs bound for the premiership and finals in 2025? And a bunch of different players have ruled themselves in and out of our fantasy side based on what we saw in the Western Bulldogs and the Hawthorn game that took place on Friday afternoon. It is MJ from the Coaches Panel with another of our Community Series match reviews, looking through the fantasy players and SuperCoach players of interest, unpacking their role, not really too fussed about their score, but really trying to give you insights and perspectives to make informed decisions as we get ever so close to not only opening round, but round one and the start of your fantasy football year. So much to unpack from this game. Let's talk about Tim English. That feels like a really nice place to start. Not the biggest story of the game, but there has been some optimism and some caution and concern for the community around Tim English. 12 months ago was coming in as one of, if not the best ruck option, and then kind of returned back to his median sort of scoring from the year prior to. Still a valuable option with people concerned about a similar trend happening with Tristan Cherry, uncertainty about whether or not even Rowan Marshall will be there in round one, and you want to spend top dollar or near it with a little bit of value. Tim is a popular name for a good reason. I know some were concerned that his ruck role split might be a little bit impacted with a couple of the other tools that they do have rolling through there, specifically a Sam Darcy, but I just didn't see that in this game. Now, whether or not the returning of guys like a Jamari Ugle-Hagan, when that happens, whether or not that affects the split, we'll wait and see. Personally, I have the perspective that Sam, as good as he is in and around the ruck, he's a way better forward right now than he is a ruckman. And when you've got someone like Tim, who is an accomplished ruckman, who's more a tall midfielder than he is a pure hit out to advantage tap ruckman, like a Max Gawn, for example, I thought some of the concern was a little over-yoked around Tim English. He did what I expected him to do in this game, which is roam the ground, get involved in all three sections of the game and three sections of the ground, and delivered a nice spot. Regular, consistent scorer. I think if you are wanting a top-end ruck that could be a top two ruck, given what he did for us in 2023, and sort of the pre-injury moments of 2022, I think Tim's right in the pocket for you. No early buy. There is no role concern. The ceiling, we'll wait and see whether or not he can return to what he did in 2023. But to me, if you're bullish and keen on Tim, he's there. He didn't do anything that if you were cooler on him, maybe you're chasing value rucks or you like others, there wasn't enough in this game that would have turned and caused your attention to diverge away from that. But I thought he looked good. I thought he was really perfectly fine. And if you're keen on him, he should be someone that should be right in the mix. The other that we were really bullishly watching in this game was a Ryley Sanders. What was really frustrating in this game was to get a real true sense of what this Bulldogs midfield mix was going to look like. And we didn't get a chance to see that. One, with Ed Richards not playing, and then second, Marcus Bontempelli basically playing just a handful of minutes before he goes off with some tightness in his body. It's hard now to be able to thread through exactly what that is with confidence of I've seen it. He did look strong in that centre bounce presence alongside a Liberatore, but he's probably fourth in line at best until Treloar returns. And that's probably about as good as it was going to be anyway, but we probably wanted to see a bit more. Libba, we'll talk about briefly, but he was outstanding at clearance and stoppage, but you're probably not going near that. Kennedy became the fourth option once Bont went out. So to me, I think there's a couple of thoughts I have around Sanders. Number one, we have had some other forwards really present ourselves over this community series already. One we'll talk about from this game. Another is at the top end, a greater cause and justification, maybe more than ever before, with how good and how prominent Isaac Rankin was in his role, and also the injury to Butters. And while waiting to see and hear from Port Adelaide exactly what they do, the confidence that a Horn Francis might not have the split of mid-forward that might have been with a Butters around. To me, the necessity for Sanders might not be there for us. We'll see what Garcia does. I thought we'll wait and see what the other cash cows do through us, but the necessity for him might not be needed. He might be the one that goes for a lot of coaches. Conversely, that's what dual position can open up and create for us. So I thought Sanders was perfectly fine. He was good. I don't see monster ceiling games coming from him when you've got the likes of Liberatore, Bontempelli, Richards back in this side. I'm just not too sure that's going to eventuate, but he doesn't have to do that. We just need a decent 5, 6, 7 week stretch from him, depending on when Treloar's back, and he can be that nice option. All I'll say is we don't have to go there now if we don't want to. Others are presenting themselves at the top end and at the bottom end, and he doesn't have to be the guy you pick. Honestly, I'd have a Bailey Smith and a Jack McRae still well ahead of him. I want to see Garcia at the Saints does before it, but I can see a world where Sanders falls out for people, not because he's going to be a bad pick, but because others they like more at the bottom end of cash cows. They like a little bit more value based on others, and then they want a slice of one or two of those top-end premium forwards. So I think he's the one that's going to be unlucky in love, but if he manages to stay in your side, I still think he's going to be perfectly fine for you. Marcus Bontempelli was a big pain point for coaches. Just out of the game, super quick, calf tightness. Now, two things that we need to do. The club have said it was 100% precautionary. What they haven't really been clear on, and they don't need to be, is if this was a full AFL game, would he have played through that level of tightness? And so they're being hyper conservative? Or is this the type of thing that would have ruled him out of a game anyway? I think it's probably enough to put some doubt in the eyes of owners to maybe fade him. I can see and understand why that's the case. And again, it's not just because of Bont, who is your 120 forever, if not 115 forever SuperCoach, and has shown he's got 110 potential in fantasy and is priced at some value with a really nice early couple of matchups favourable for him. But I think what might be the concern for coaches is outside of how serious this tightness is also players in and around this price range, if not a little bit under, have started to pop in a way that we go, I wanted him anyway. Bont's got a little niggle. I don't like a guy that has that in a community series game. I'm off. And so I can see people moving, especially in SuperCoach, going from a Bontempelli over to a Nick Dacos. It does change your buy structure, but I can see that. Whereas, say, in AFL Fantasy, I can see people going, oh, look, Jordan Dawson didn't have as centre-bounce heavy role as I might have liked, but he still scored and splits were still reasonable. So I'm over there. So I can actually see this creating, in a good way for coaches, a dynamic reason to look at somebody that they probably just anchored and never really questioned. And every player in your team, you should know why they're there and what their function is, and have challenged every single one of them. So can you still run with Bont? Yeah, absolutely you can. His fixture run of those first 3 or 4 opponents, his recent 3-game history is outstanding. We want to hear from the club exactly a little bit more information about how concerning it is. You don't want to ever run into round 1 with a guy with an injury concern over their head, so that might be enough. But to me, it's not yet enough to rule him out of consideration, but I can see a lot of coaches, as a result, using this to open their eyes up to other player options that could sit through there. Look, there's probably 2 other dogs that I think are worthy of consideration and discussion. One's a bit more of a lock. The other's probably in the ventures of it. Look, quickly I'll touch. Look, Matt Kennedy's fine, but do you really want a piece of that? I really just feel like he's gone to the same club that will create the same problems for him, which is a lack of centre bounce consistency. And Sanders is ahead of him as far as I'm concerned. He looked good. He was fine. But Harms was rolling through there as well. So to me, I just put a line through it. You've got enough options. You don't need to put that pain point on you. Sam Davidson, just pick him. Just absolutely a star. Now, he's playing up and across that wing, but and then pushing both through the arcs of defensive and forward lines. The question for me is kind of a couple of fold. Is he on field or is he a bench option for you? That's a big question. It depends how deep and how far you're running, not just through the forward line, but your other lines as well. Personally, I'm quite comfortable to place him on field. And that's not just a basis of what I saw in a game like this that is high transition footy, lots of uncontested possession, lots of the ball zooming around, and not a lot of locked-in congestion, which we know is typical of these community series games. But it's actually about watching what he's done at the VFL level and also then seeing other intra-club and internal trials of what I've seen. They love to get him involved up and down the ground. I think his scoring certainly can be capped because he can, and we saw it in this game. Just end up on the dead wing for 5-10 minutes and really not score anything. But he's priced so dirt cheap. There's no risk. He is, of course, always a sub concern. But outside of round one, when he's really in that money-making phase, rounds 2, 3, 4, it's best 18 and that sub-vest, should it come his way, falls out. Any player that's in debutant territories or early games does sit in that spot. But to me, if you didn't have Davidson, this is an absolute must move that you need to go and make. He does look destined to be one of the better ball movers. And we know that Bevo's got this history now of falling in love with these players that come from the second tier systems in the AFL. They buy into his game style. They've been recruited for a purpose, and it gives them games and opportunities. We've seen this now multiple years under Luke Beveridge, where he always has a new shiny toy that he loves, that buys in, and he just gives them 6, 8, 10 games right out of the gate based on their preseason. And I think he is that. And so if you don't have Davidson, absolutely. Is he a must on field? No, he's not a must, but I'm very, very comfortable to roll him through there. Then the last Bulldog that I think is probably worthy of a conversation is a Joel Freijah. Really impressive game from him. A big flag and caveat that's got to get stamped on this one, though, while we talked about the absences in the midfield. There is no Bailey Dale, and there's some uncertainty about what it's going to be like in round one, whether Dale's there or not. I think regardless around Freijah, his price range is actually a bit of a pressure valve release for coaches. We've been needing someone in this price range to really pop as an option for us, because as we've talked through this and the preseason strategy episode that came out just a few days on this platform and this channel, Mini Monk and I alluded about how we're taking almost risks from potentially D1 right through to D6 with a lot of mid-price range or a lot of value options is maybe the spot to say it. Now, different if you're running Sinclair, Sheasel, that sort of option at D1, but a lot of us are running 3, 4, 5 deep that look and should be good scorers, but with low rookie options and cash cow options outside of Freijah, outside of Reed, and potentially a Bo Allen. We don't have a lot of parachute outs. And so what Freijah could do for you structurally sitting at the 5, the 4, or the 6 in your defensive lines, depending on how you like to balance it out, is getting him on field as an option. Not saying you have to, but as an option could just mean you're going to allow yourself a parachute to trade into if he or another of these mid-range guys fail in your back line, and all of a sudden you can jump into your Reed, you can jump into your Allen, and not like you've got already all the parachute cash cows to trade into in your side. So to me, I think Freijah is good. I temper expectations with no Bailey Dale. He was the one that was moving the ball through them. But with Jason Johannesson out for an extended period of time, he's certainly in best 22. I'd be shocked if he gets a vest. And I think he's worth a hit at that D4, 5, 6 spot, depending on how you want to structure your defensive lines. Let's talk about the Hawks. If you're a Will Day owner, look, he was a little quiet at the start, but politely, again, players like Will, whether they be established in their role and you know what they're going to be, you're not really looking outside of anything is he moving well? Because his role in the team is really secure. He's their best and classiest midfielder. And that's no shade on Newcombe. It's actually just an elevation of what Will Day is. First gear, 100% first gear. The role is there. If you're bullish and keen on him, absolutely continue on. Personally, in fantasy, I'm not that keen or bullish. I think there's better accumulators that are in similar price ranges that I like more. But if you're if you're keen and you're a fan, go. SuperCoach is the interesting one. He's really intriguing to me. If you think the Hawks can come out of the gate strong, he can stay healthy. He's shown that he's got 110 scoring potential at his price point. That's unbelievable value. So that's enough. I like Day as SuperCoach. Not a fan in fantasy. Look, Dylan Moore was fine. Don't get worried about the score, but I also don't think you need that in the forward lines this year. We got better options to start with. James Sicily's probably the interesting one. There's two schools of thought here, right? He did get flung forward in this game for the final few moments. Again, the game was tight. The Hawks were trying to win. Is that an indication of what they're going to do? Or was that hey, we're in a tight match situation here. Let's try what we might do in a game, or let's experiment here to see what this could do. That threat has been there all preseason, and coaches that have got Sicily, because there is unbelievable upside based on his price point and contrasted to his historical pedigree. The fact we saw that is probably a little more alarming to you. That would be the only thing that I would say. That's an alarming thought. But for the 3.25 of the game where he was sitting down back, he looked exceptional. I do think the recruits that they've got actually allow him to fleece all defensive lockdown need that was there at times over the last few years. He is absolutely free to fly, to intercept, to be the playmaker. The ball still is all flooding through him. I'm changing my tune a little bit on James Sicily. I'd been interested, but by the time I'd got to really crunching the numbers, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? That risk is too high. I'm out. And the risk is still there. But I think to sit alongside that level of risk is what is the risk profile of your defensive lineup anyway? And what are you doing at D1? Because if you're going up to Sheasel, you're just going for a more safety net anchor. And that's not a bad idea or a bad approach. That's just what you're looking to do. I've seen some others run as shallow as a Jaden Short at D1, which does feel a little thin. Maybe not so much in AFL Fantasy, but certainly in SuperCoach to me, that does feel a little thin. We're taking risk at all portions of our defensive line here. Sicily's risk isn't about his scoring capacity, isn't about his health. It is about, does he get flung forward in the final few minutes of a game to win a game? And if that's the case, let's run this thought thread for a moment. Where do you want, if you're Hawthorn and you're a Sicily owner, if you believe you can get the ball inside forward 50, what are you doing with it? Well, you want the guy that's there. If Sicily's sitting at the back, there's no easy ball movement. It is pace. It is speed on ball. It is go. It is slingshot. It is territory. You actually want him trying to get the ball in the forward half. So maybe this is the space we want him. Yes, there's no intercepts in those final few moments, but the super coaches, if it's a tight game and he's moved forward, there's some potential weighting of his points. I'm changing my tune a little bit on Sicily. Is it enough to start him? Maybe. But he's an option that for non-owners or for people that hadn't considered him, I would say, as a part of your defensive risk profile, he should need to be an option you look at that D1 spot. If you're running the Sheasel, the Whitfields, the Zorkos, the Sinclairs, I don't think you need him at D2. I think that might be a little too top-heavy in the back line. But if you need a D1 that's got upside and there is a touch of risk to it, I feel like that's a play you can absolutely look at as well. Everything's got risk associated to it in 2025, but where and how are you slicing your risk, and what is the pain that you're prepared to live with? Is it a pain of losing cash? Is it a pain of losing a role? Is it a pain of being flung forward? Everything's got pain. As long as you know what it is before you walk into it, I think you can manage your way through it. look, there's not really too many other hooks. I think it's Day. I think it's Sicily, and that is it. I don't think you're looking at me. I think there's better options, even if you are. But do you agree with my take on these matchups, these players, and what I have seen? Comment below if you're watching this on YouTube and let me know which Hawks and which Dogs are in consideration for you this pre-season. And if you are watching this on YouTube, you haven't subscribed and turned the notifications on, make sure you do so. There's episodes dropping every single day, multiple on some days, especially through the community series. Make sure you go and check it out. I hope you're enjoying listening. This is an audio podcast, so give us a 5 stars if you haven't done so already. And Apple Podcast subscribers, make sure you give us a nice comment in the podcast. We'll be sure to read it out on one of these episodes if you do leave a rating and a nice little comment as well. Hey, make sure you check out the description in this episode for all the handles where you can get in touch with us across social media, get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch, and become a Patreon. Whatever the tier it is, there are some rewards that sit in there nicely for you. And if you're a Breakout or Premium tier, as a bonus, you also get our draft rankings. So maybe you're heading into your draft over the next couple of days on the Keeper platform. Those draft rankings are sitting for you there. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back again with you real soon with another of these Amy Community Series match reviews.